I love power rankings when it comes to Succession because they're totally subjective because it changes constantly. And really, again, you're kind of looking at it from a bunch of people playing with a bunch of drama that doesn't essentially matter. But with power rankings, you get to who's actually winning, who thinks they're winning, and it actually tells you so much about the person who's ranking them and how they perceive the world more than anything. So your power rankings, for example, could be completely different to mine, and so on. And that's what makes discussion around the show interesting. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go from the top to the bottom, because the truth is the appeal of Succession is not who's about to win. It's a race to the bottom. It's about who's about to lose the most. And that is way more interesting. So we'll start at the top in at number 1. And I'll put 1 and 2 together. I have Nan Pierce and the Pierce family, and then Matson, obviously played by Alexander Skarsgård, in that order in my 1 and 2. And they're both kind of tenuous now at the moment. We're both on the right side of deals with Waystar that are shaky because they're also in danger of getting caught in the perpetual family drama tornado. But Pierce, I have topped by making $10 billion last week, just walking her way into it for an American legacy news corporation, which is probably about 10 times what it's actually worth too. So just for that masterful stroke, I don't know if that sale's actually going to happen by the looks of things, but just through that master stroke, I have to put her number 1. Matson as well, with his not aggressive phone call in this week's episode, being in a position to walk away pending any bullshit, whereas everyone else is desperate and needs not only this deal to go through, but needs the drama, whereas Matson is at his life where he can just say fuck it and walk away from the biggest business deal he's ever done. So whatever way you look at it, Matson's kind of winning there. In the number 3, I have Tom, who's actually still his dorky self. We saw that in this week's episode where when Logan is giving his speech to the troops, Tom is like, I could kiss you from here. But having said that, in spite of Tomming it up, he's still actually winning. He's conflicted out all the good divorce lawyers in New York. He made the right call with Kerry. I love this description of it. Like trying to tell Kerry that she didn't have the job as an anchor, like Israel, Palestine, except harder and much more important. But he also avoided the firing line by delegating it to Greg. And then he spoke with Logan's voice in episode 1 of the season, negotiating the deal with Pierce, and seems to be living his best life away from Shiv. He's actually thriving through the divorce in what I think a lot of us would have expected to go the other way. So Tom, I have in at number 3. In at number 4, always going to be in around the top 5. It's Logan. He's got his competitive fight back with the "you're fucking pirates" insane but rousing speech in the office of ATN this week. I feel like during that speech, though, there was one quote where it's like, I want people to think they can't believe what we just said. That feels like something that I took away, and I'm like, that's going to come back to haunt him in a way that he doesn't intend it to. But he is winning, even just being able to give one of his withering put downs to the family, saying, you're such fucking dopes at the end, you're not serious people, which is so insulting to the type of person that this is directed at. Also, as well, I think he had a moment of genuine realization and honesty, and a human kind of moment, even if it was in true Logan fashion, packaged with layers and layers upon manipulation in order to get him what he wants business-wise. But again, the closer people can get to actual near humanity, they're never going to get fully the way there. That's not why we watch the show, and that's not why we follow them as characters. But if they can get close to it, they're going to be top of the power rankings. And with that in mind, in at number 5 is someone who, for much of the last 2 episodes, was right at the bottom of my power rankings, but with the last kind of actions of this episode, jumped all the way up. And it's true, having one of those human moment of realizations. I've got Connor in at number 5. Connor, of course, obviously last week was positing whether he'd spend $100 million to protect his 1% of the presidential vote. And again, this week, Willa, in the middle of their wedding rehearsals, got up and said, I can't do this, and then went to the bathroom for their so-called friends for 40 minutes, according to Connor. That's where he's living at the moment. So and then, of course, obviously goes off with his siblings to sing Famous Blue Raincoat by Leonard Cohen in karaoke, which was just depressing. So how is he winning, you might ask? I loved his speech at the end where it's like, I don't need love. It's like a superpower. I love listening to the Succession podcast, the official one with Kara Swisher presenting it. And they spoke to the writer of this episode, and she spoke about how attachment theory and how people who grow up not receiving love get used to not being able to, not needing it or not requiring it in the rest of the way that the kids do. And Connor even just having that moment of realization. And I'd say this isn't like a turning point for him, but it is a moment of clarity. So I do imagine he will be back down next week because that is Connor's nature. But even being able to tiptoe towards self-realization, self-acceptance, and emotional self-reliance is a huge win for any of these characters, because none of them, a lot of them probably won't even nearly get there. On a similar vein, I had her ranked dead last week after being forced into, like, not only being forced into the wedding she clearly doesn't want and walked out on this week, but then being forced to change even what her wedding plans are while she's marrying this person for money. And the person she's marrying is clinging to his 1%. Willa, she ranked dead last week, but similar to Con, had a moment of clarity ditching the rehearsal this week. I love their quote where it's like, hey, you can't be jumping for joy the whole time. But in the end, seemed to actually have weighed up her options and found contentment and acceptance within her decision. Again, any sign of humanity is a huge win for these characters. And number 7 down from, I had her at number 2 last week, and I had her up towards the top. But this week, Kerry, you've just absolutely fucked it. She played her hand this week, going for the ATN anchor role, only to be mocked by everyone. I loved Roman's quote where it's like, and then sudden smile. Oh, and had to be told the bad news by Greg. When Greg is the person charged with giving you your career devastation, then you know you've sunk to new lows. Also as well, like Kendall described her as losing her betrayal, Cherry. She's seeing the other side of Logan now. Once he gets you in, it's only a matter of time until he eventually betrays you. Kerry's now experienced that, and sometimes I think Kerry will have learned from this episode. It's better just to sit with your hand, and then rather than actually play it and show what you want and risk failing, which is what she did. And now she's after coming down dramatically as a result. She's kind of caught in the whirlwind now because she's shown weakness and shown people what she wants. In at number 8, I've got Greg, who is hilarious as always. If it's entertainment, Greg is always going to be around 1 or 2. I love this quote describing Logan walking around the office. There was 2 great quotes. One was, it was so good. It's like Jaws if everyone in Jaws worked for Jaws, or it's like if Santa Claus was a hitman. He was told to fuck off by Kerry after absolute disaster. And I also as well, like, you know, you're losing when you have to say, Greg telling himself saying, oh, I did the job. If you have to say that, then chances are you didn't do the job. In number 9, I've got Stewie and Sandy. Usually would be high up in here when they're involved with the main storylines, but voting no to Gojo to go one last round with Logan just feels like a mistake. And while this isn't uncommon, you sense it's being driven by their personal acrimony towards Logan and doesn't take into account Matsson's volatility. You can see this deal right about to blow up. I don't think that's a spoiler. I don't think it's going to be a surprise when it happens. They're going to fuck this deal, every last one of them. And you get the sense that they, similar to the kids, have a need to keep the fight going, and it's going to backfire massively and land them in bed with the one thing they didn't want, and that's them going to be in bed with the Roys for life. They're not going to be able to shake them. And it's decisions like this, seeing it in real time, that for the first time, I think Stewie and Sandy, they weren't the shrewd operators they thought they were. They were just addicts, addicted to the drama, addicted to trying to get one over on Logan. Speaking of which, let's discuss the kids, starting at number 10, because we're getting into the biggest losers now. But the person who lost the least, I guess, would be Roman. Again, similar to Greg having to tell himself that he did the job, Roman found himself having to say to the people that weren't letting him on the helicopter, I'm going to set aside several $100,000 to destroy your lives, which again, it's the type of thing, if you're saying it out loud, you're probably in a losing scenario. Playing both sides, so he always ends up on top, of course. Yeah, very Succession, very Roman as well. But ultimately, I think what we saw this week wasn't shrewd, savvy Roman trying to get the best for himself. I think what we saw was abuse victim Roman, who has to keep going back to his dad and has to keep replaying the endless cycles and keep falling into the same traps. Like even how Logan just welcomed him back into his web. He didn't even blink. He knew Roman was coming back. And that's what made it devastating, because Roman, probably more so of any of the kids, is probably the person that Logan has abused most, because we speak and hear of, and we've seen at one stage, physical abuse from Logan towards Roman. And that's where the show has a depth and isn't just a comedy, and actually is something that has quite a lot of layers. But again, in theory, Roman is probably the most likely to. The fact that that is what's going on, and an abuse victim goes back to their abuser without much fight and gives up on their principles and everything they've kind of worked towards so easily. The fact that he is the least losing of the siblings kind of speaks to how bad things are going for the rest of them. In at 11, I've got Kendall, who, you know, trying to seem zen at times this week, saying in Buddhism, sometimes your greatest tormentor is your greatest teacher. Again, sometimes I don't know if it's Kendall or Jeremy Strong speaking. I think sometimes he just riffs these lines because that's who Jeremy Strong is also as a character. Amazing stuff. What I found fascinating about Kendall this week, though, is we've seen it before, particularly when he's in a number 2 role. He tends to fuck it when he's in the big seat. But when Kendall is working for someone, particularly when he's been Logan's lapdog, there tends to be a cogent, competent version of Kendall who's constantly at war with the addict, who's just got a penchant for self-sabotage and blowing everything up. And we saw the latter win in this round. You know, we had kind of the Mattson call take place out in the lane, and that immediately led. You can see Kendall's thought process where it's like Mattson is, he senses there's blood in the water. Mattson's worried. He's having to call me and kind of threaten me at this stage. But at the same time, he never tells the siblings about it. He never mentions anything about it. And on that level, that kind of gives away that he knows he's self-sabotaging. He knows that it's the addict side of him winning this round. But again, he just can't give it up. He's so close to actually succeeding. He's so close to getting his payout, being able to buy the property that his dad wanted. And he just can't let that happen, because he doesn't believe he deserves happiness fundamentally. And again, like, you kind of play into that heavier themes that tie into in the background of Succession, where again, these are kids that were abused and neglected by their father and are constantly chasing their approval or trying to beat them in a kind of Oedipal way. Then at 12, I've got Shiv. Shiv is absolutely taking L's left, right, and center. Right now, what we see is from someone who, when we first met her, was really kind of intelligent, emotionally savvy, somewhat moral as well. You know, when we met her in season 1, she was also having an affair, but like, again, she's somewhat moral in this world. But that person is truly gone. And now the inner child in Shiv is fully at the wheel. She is driven 100% by emotion right now. And the typical Roy kid style, she is losing hard while thinking she's winning. Last week, we saw her smugly overpaying for Pierce while they were bidding 6. She was like, yeah, we need to up it to 10. And then smiling as she got robbed, as they took money out of her pocket when she didn't need to. And she can't even get a lawyer at this stage. Well, the husband that she saw as a soft touch, well, the husband that she said to his face at one stage, I don't love you, you're not good enough for me, he is outmaneuvering her and outplaying her at every stage. Shiv is losing while thinking she's winning, and that's kind of, at this stage, that's kind of sad, because again, in Shiv, we saw someone who has so much promise, and someone who almost got out, someone who was so close to avoiding all of this. She is now fully in it and fully losing at every field. In a number 13, though, let's talk about the shitfuckers, because they are always in the dirt. Let's talk about Jerry. Poor Jerry, one of the only competent, intelligent people in this show who isn't completely damaged and is now just left out of Logan's war room for no particular reason other than she was just in the room with our bottom last on the power rankings, Hugo, who was caught laughing at Kerry's audition and told to suck off the board. More than anything else, these are the people who aren't power players, who are hangers on, who have no kind of remit or no way of kind of pulling back if they're ever in the shit. And now they are very much in the shit in a situation where everyone involved is losing anyway.